Visiting a care home in September when he announced his health and social care levy, the Prime Minister was today fighting off attacks from his own party over a tightening of the rules on the cap. Some Tory MPs say the new plan disadvantages the less well-off because it'll take them longer to reach the cap. Any help they get with bills won't count towards their total spend. It's designed to save the government money, but it could be costing them support.
There was a change this week that is causing some concerns and raising additional questions about how that impacts on different groups of people around the country. So I've got quite a lot of work to do. I need to go back into Parliament and speak to colleagues and listen to the debate before we make final decisions. I'm not opposed to voting against it.
Under the changes to the original plan system, someone with an average priced London home worth £500,000 would need to pay the full cost of residential care, which could be £700 a week. After more than 2 years of paying those costs, they'd reached the cap, leaving them more than 80% of their house asset intact, more than £400,000 to pass on. Someone in the northeast with a home at the much lower average house price there, around £150,000, would, under the government's new scheme, be paying their contribution to residential care costs for just over 4 years before they reach the cap and don't have to spend more. They'll have less than half of their house asset value left, around £67,000.
Wealthier people will reach the cap at exactly the time that we thought they would have done, but less well-off people who've had help from the means-tested system as they move towards the cap won't have that help counted towards the cap, and so they're going to meet the cap much later than their better-off counterparts. And that means for those with assets of less than £100,000, say, they're never going to hit the cap. The cap doesn't help them at all, and that means that we're not protecting them from the risk of catastrophic costs.
These are incredibly generous, and they're much better than the existing system, because under the existing system, nobody gets any support if they have assets of £23,000 or more. Now you get support if you have £100,000 or less.
Earlier, the man the Prime Minister beat to the Tory leadership told a conference now was not the time to vote against the changes, but they were a stingy move.
It is very disappointing that the way the cap is going to be calculated is going to be changed, which means that it's going to be a less progressive measure than was hoped for and will help fewer people with lower asset levels than have been previously hoped for. And that is a really big disappointment.
On the streets of Bolton today, some signs that view was spreading wider.
If I lose 80% of my house, let's say, I would hope they'll take 80% if somebody's got loads of money if it helps the social care system. We're not treated right up at north here than to south.
When it comes to the north-south divide, it just kind of exacerbates that problem. It just looks as though that's the way it's going, that the government doesn't care about the north.
The Prime Minister's defending his social care reforms straight after a series of clashes with some in his party on sleaze and rail upgrades. And he's finding it harder to command loyalty as his judgment is under attack.
So let's get the latest now from Gary in Westminster.
Well, you remember we were talking at the height of the sleaze controversy just a few short weeks ago, how some Tory MPs were going around saying, well, actually, in future, when it comes to a vote here, I'm going to take my own counsel. I'm not going to listen to the whips. Well, tonight, we're seeing that in play. An awful lot of whips are complaining that MPs who are in their charge, their ward, they're playing their cards close to their chest, not necessarily telling the whips candidly what they intend to do. The government's hope is still that they're looking at many more abstentions than they are actual votes against the measure when it comes to a vote here expected around 10 o'clock. But nonetheless, there's a real jumpiness around the place. And something else has added to all of that, and that is Boris Johnson's performance today. You're going to see a bit more of it in Paul McNamara's report coming up. Boris Johnson made a fantastic connection, many MPs in there feel, with a huge chunk of their electorate. They see him as a very successful performer politician. Today, they felt they saw, and they were WhatsApping it to each other, all talking about it in there a moment ago when I was in there, they thought they saw a politician whose low battery light was flashing, and that really worries them.
Gary Gibbon.